Thank you so much, Carlos, for coming onto my YouTube channel. I appreciate it.
Sure thing, sure thing.
So we went to college together. I had no idea that you produced music. When did you discover music production?
So it was around, I want to say 2005. There was a friend of mine in my freshman year in high school. He said he does music on his computer, and I was like, that's kind of weird. I didn't even know people can do that. Like I'm still at that time I didn't know much about music. I just listened to it. I just figured people just put microphones next to an instrument and record it. But I didn't know that you can create different sounds on your computer like by itself. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So he showed me the program. At the time I thought it was free. It's not, but I
What's the
paid for it.
program?
FL Studio.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really start working on it up until 2009, entering college. And I was like, okay, like, let me just try to make something on this. And with me not having too much knowledge of music theory, I just created something that sounded good. And it ended up being like my first production I've made. So I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to continue doing this.
So tell me about college, because you started
Mhm.
this in high school and you just briefly mentioned that your first production really started in college. So what was your major in college? How did that like help increase your skill set with music production?
My first degree in college was psychology, and that lasted like a year. And then I switched to, I think, English for like a semester. Then I switched to religion. So I ended up graduating with a religion degree. Did it have, like, is it helpful with my career now? In the sense of like, did this degree help me to get the job related to it? No. But I feel like the experience I had in college, especially learning, taking my religion courses, helped me mentally to like believe in myself to get more work done, if that makes sense. So like
For sure.
it kind of helped, but not in the way that most people would see it helping.
I hear that a lot. I feel like
Hmm.
college is like an experience that increases your mental capacity to learn in the
Yeah,
real
it
world.
does.
Not necessarily in the same field, but
Mhm.
sometimes just to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely learn something staying up at like 4 in the morning to prep for an exam the next day. Normally, if you ask any little kid that or any high school student, like, I'm not doing that. That's crazy in their first years. But, to really go back and think, man, I really pushed myself to take this exam and I passed it. If I was able to do that within a couple of weeks, imagine what I can do with something I actually want to do and I have more time. So I kind of go with it with that mindset.
I love that. I love that.
Hmm.
You talked about increasing your skill set over the years with that program that you discovered
Hmm.
in high school. How exactly did you do that? Did you take a course? How did you increase that skill set over the years?
So I definitely looked up YouTube videos in terms of like how other producers use the program. And what I ended up doing also was kind of like reverse engineering. So I'll go to like different links where they have, okay, this is the file of this production that I made or this beat that I made. So I'm like, okay, let me download it and let me analyze how they made this beat. Let me analyze how they did this. So now that I see the structure, I kind of reverse engineered it and it helped me to create my own sound over time. The other thing is working with different musicians. At first, I was like so terrified working with other musicians because I'm thinking, I can't play an instrument. Like everyone would say, like, oh, like, but you're good. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I'm okay, but this person's been playing piano for 15 years. Like, they're definitely much better. And you would think that, but there's actually something interesting working with different musicians is that no matter what skill level you're at, you always learn something new. Um, so for the guys I'm working with now who, they definitely have played longer than I have, I've learned different techniques to help me to make my production faster. And I've also shared them some techniques I use to make it sound better or whatever. So definitely it has been the YouTube videos and working with other musicians.
I've heard that networking in any field is so important. Would you
Hmm.
say that some of the musicians you also met in college, or how did you really meet those people?
So two of them actually went to Andrews. One of them is a huge TikTok star, which is crazy. um, yeah, so one of them, his name is Kyle. He goes by Kyle, you made that. And it was funny because during I think it was my last year, my friend asked me, "Hey, you should go talk to him and see if you guys can make some music." And I said, "Nah, like I heard his stuff. His stuff is really good. Like there'd be no way he want to work with me, you know." And that was always my struggle at first doing music is that I tend to second guess myself. Like I tend to doubt myself a lot. Even today, it happens. It's not as often. And I reached out to him, and one thing led to another where I went to his house last year, February, and this year again, February, to connect with him and connect with other artists that he knows. And I just think back, like, man, imagine if I didn't reach out to him that time. Imagine if I just said, no, no, he doesn't want to work with me. Forget that.
So
Mm,
networking and really music tutorials on YouTube
right.
were the things that increased your skill set. I love that. I love that. So
Hmm.
we come from a very, very close-knit community. Has there been any pushback, especially coming from a religion background? And I would think that with that background, you're kind of thought to pursue another path. What
Hmm.
was there any pushback, and how did you deal with that?
Most of the pushback was from older people. Most of it really wasn't something like, oh, well, it doesn't make any money. It was more so of like, oh, like, why would you want to work in the music industry? It's like, it's so bad. And like, how, and then the money part comes in. It's like, oh, are you sure that you can be able to provide for yourself and for your family? Are you sure you can do this? Um, but then the other half were people like in our age group where they were like, that sounds amazing. Yeah, why not? There's so many musicians in the Adventist community. We should to push ourselves to do more music and make it a career. Honestly, what I've done to deal with it was I stopped telling my goals to people who I feel like wouldn't be as interested. So mostly the older generation. I just don't really tell them too much my goals because, and it's nothing bad against them. It's just that from their period of being on Earth, they can't conceive like how can you do this with music and still be moral and be successful and still not sell your soul type of thing. So I don't really blame them for their perspective. It's just something that they do not understand. So for me, it's like I already know what I want to do. I already know myself, and and they'll still support. But I think the best thing to do is just keep your goals to people who are actually willing to support you. You don't have to tell everybody.
So far, you've been doing this since high school. Tell me
Hmm.
what so far in your music production has been your career defining moment to make you really believe in what you're doing.
I'm not even sure if I can mention this because it's still very, very recent. I'll go into kind of small details. So there is this artist that I connected with actually this year in February in my last trip to Canada. And my friend introduced me to him. And it was so weird because this is the person he's been working with years. So to me, I'm thinking, listen to this guy's music. I'm like, man, he's like a celebrity to me, et cetera, et cetera. That's crazy. Um, and I met him in February and we did some music together and I got a compliment by him where he says like, dude, like your music is amazing. Like, man, like, oh, just keep pushing, man. Like, you're so good at this. Like, don't doubt yourself. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the greatest compliment I ever got. It's one thing to hear like family and friends say that you're good, but to hear someone who's been doing music for years and you're not as close, and they tell you, that your music is great, it's like, wow, that's awesome. That's amazing. Thank you. So that definitely helped me to believe in myself more. Um, and it was interesting because the music we made that day was it took maybe, I think, an hour to just make 3 songs. It was the most relaxed session I've had. I was like, wow, I didn't really try too much. It was just like in the moment and we're just talking to each other. And it made me realize that, even though music is a business, it's also my first passion. And not to forget that, enjoy what you're doing at the same time, as well as thinking about, okay, well, I have to make a living off of this, etc.
You talked about passion a little bit, and I think in my experience, passion connects with purpose. Talk about that a little bit from your perspective, and even that conversation with and that experience with that artist. Did you feel like in that moment you had finally connected your passion with your purpose?
I think I did during that time, and it was kind of like I started thinking back of everything I've done up until that point, and started to realize that everything happened for a reason. Everything was leading up to that time point where it's just like, oh wow, I really can do this, and I actually really want to do this because it's not only just a way for me to connect with artists and like, oh man, I work with this person. But I really started to see even on social media where people started going to me for advice, thinking like, wait, I inspired you? That's insane. So it made me really realize that, while at first it was fun to do the music, I realized that the impact I'm having is more important than I thought before. And it made me realize, okay, this is what I'm meant to do. And I definitely want to continue doing this because if I reached one person by just posting things on Instagram, I can't imagine how many people I'd reach if I worked with like a very influential artist.
So now, final question. If you had some advice to give to somebody who wants to, maybe they are in high school and they just discovered FL Studio, they just got FL Studio, what advice would you give to them? Give me 2 things.
I guess the first advice would be to know yourself. And the reason why is because the more that you do music, the more that you'll have people telling you what they want you to do and where you should mold your sound to next. And it's like, if you don't feel comfortable by doing something, you don't have to do it. It's still like you're still playing the music yourself, so you don't have to worry about being forced to do it. If you don't feel like doing it, then don't do it. But also, it helps you to understand morality-wise, like what you shouldn't do. And I feel like most of the time people, they tend to sign a contract because there's a lot of money involved. And it's just like, that's great that you made this much, but, there's a show that I watched that talks about law of equivalent exchange. And I'm thinking like, if you got this much money, what in exchange do you have to give up? You have to give up how much of your time and stuff. So really know who you are and know what you're willing to do. The second advice I would say is make a lot of connections. I actually learned recently about having more connections with people who do music. And I realized that maybe not so with artists, but with producers, that community is so supportive. It's insane. So if they see someone that's struggling, they're willing to come in and try to help them out, because everyone's trying to get to the same goal. So definitely network with more musicians and more artists as well.
So network and know what you're willing to do and willing not to do. And I think that's applicable to everyone in their respective careers, whatever you're doing. Like networking is king, and you need to figure out what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. So thank you for that advice. I think it's very sound. And thank you so much for coming and supporting me on my YouTube channel and sharing your story. I appreciate you.